I am Shusara Kumara. Welcome to Satsang. You are beginningless. You are endless. You are divine.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Satsang with the Shambhala Center. This is Shusara Kumara, and I am joined by some of our core council members tonight, Pialayan, Linda, and Tim. And we're all very pleased to be with you again and ready for another great program. So go ahead, take a nice deep breath, and let's clear the space. Mother, Father, God that I am, through the great central sun hierarchy, through the office of the Christ and the order of Melchizedek, I call upon Archangel Michael to bring the sapphire blue ray. Cut away, cut away, cut away anything in all of our four lower vehicles not emanating directly from our I Am presence. And I'll call on Archangel Zachiel, keeper of the violet flame. Blaze, blaze, blaze the violet flame through all of our four lower bodies. Transmute, transmute, transmute all the psychic debris Michael has cut free. I now bring forth the invincible ring pass knot and the mirror blue light of invisibility to completely surround each of us. And I call forth the shaft of pure Christ light to surround each one of us. And I ask that these shafts of light be brought to the center of the earth, where I call on Archangel Gabriel to seal them. And I ask that the legions of Michael completely surround each tube of light. And now I ask that our vibrations be raised high above the psychic and astral worlds to the highest realm of illumined truth we each can attain at this time. And our Mother, Father, God, we place ourselves in service to you and to humanity. And our core council places itself in service to all of you tonight. We ask that only that which is direct from you be We ask that only that which is direct from you be permitted into our perceptions and that all else of the lower mind be kept out. And we ask that only that which is direct from you be permitted through us. And because we have asked this, we consider it so. So be it. Come on back. Sorry, I got a little tongue-tied there. There's like no thought when I'm doing the protection, and every now and again, my mouth just seems to take off and do its own thing. So funny. And then when it does, it's like thought has to register. Go, where was I? And it's like not even. I have to go. Oh, where was I? Interesting. Okay, we had a really good session here in Charlotte beforehand, and I want to kind of repeat it. And it's really beautiful. I love, spirit lies in the synchronicity. So if there's take that little piece, write it down, because it's the absolute truth. And it's one way that you can recognize how the self with the capital S, spirit, is moving, how everything is interconnected and how it all is moving together. And you see it in all the synchronicities that pop up in the world. And it's always just a magical, beautiful thing to witness and important to acknowledge when it does happen. So it just happened. And Pialayan and Tim probably have no idea what I'm talking about right now, do you? Do you know? Do you know?
I was just distracted by putting a Listerine breath strip in my mouth.
So you don't know. Tim, do you know what the synchronicity was that just happened? He missed it. Yeah. I didn't think anyone would actually catch it. And as I'm saying it, I probably won't be able to remember either, but we'll try. So the last session that we had, I said to Pielian and Tim before we started the radio program, I said, I'm going to count on the two of you to help me bring it back up, because when I'm working, there's no thought. So it's how would we even word it? It's just knowing that moves through my vocal cords, right? So a lot of times I say things, and then if someone says to me, "Can you repeat it?" I can't, because I wasn't even there to witness what was said in the first place half the time. So I have to really track things. So I said to them, be prepared, because I'm not going to really know how to start it. I know what we just did was really good, but I don't really remember how I got there, right? So we were just before the program having this very nice little conversation with this delightful man, and it completely brought up exactly what I wanted to talk about tonight, which is, in a sense, how it is that you perceive your story. And it's going to seem a little contradictory for people who do this work and for people who are longtime listeners of our program, because in one sense it'll sound like I'm almost affirming the story, and I'm not, but this is a really interesting little piece. So the conversation that we were having before the program was concerning a person's story, and his story, taken from probably most people's point of perception, would have been a very sad story, or certainly disconcerting, to say the least. But he functions with it from a very different place. So rather than have it be something that he has held on to as a reason to feel victimized and, oh, poor me, and nothing ever works out for me and all that, he's done something else with it. Now, of course, on the level where you can pull out and see beyond stories, period, we see it's just a repolarization of the same story, and that's another lecture. But for tonight, I wanted to share the importance of being capable of doing that, because until you're at a certain place in the way you function in the world, you won't be ready for deeper work. And there are people that, may come to me wanting to do dissolution work because they're seeing it as kind of the answer to their prayers, but they're not ready for it. You see, if you can't function in your world in a kind of a fairly stable, balanced place, you're not ready for dissolution work. Okay. Now, to some, that may seem contradictory or counterintuitive, because you might say, well, if you're a mess anyway, then wouldn't dissolution be easier, right? But there's a piece of the capacity of the mind on a psychological level that needs to be in place first before you can then go in and kind of tear it all apart. And I know that sounds really paradoxical, but it's true. There are a lot of people out there who, like, they might think that they're ready for this work, and what they really need is a good psychologist for a while, until they can get themselves in a good place. Then it may be time to go deeper. But until then, doing deeper work is not going to help them. You see, it'll actually work against them for a while. So we started out the night here in Charlotte talking specifically to one of our members here who comes all the time, and his story is the exact opposite. So the way the patterning runs for him, the way consciousness there was programmed, it is to hold on to the victim's story kind of at all costs. Right now, Linda, I know I've always told you, you are the best victim in the world, or at least used to be. But maybe you relinquished your title, and there's someone else who can hold on to that. You're okay with that? Okay. So this guy is this wonderful person that everybody here just adores, and he can't see it. And the story is so strong, that even to get him to just be in a moment where the story drops is almost impossible. Okay, because it's serving a purpose. Now, remember that the ego itself is the victim. There are three main roles that get played out in the lower mind, okay? They are the victim, they're the perpetrator, and they're the savior. The ego plays all of them. It has to play all of them because the world is all of them, right? And that is the ego. It's singular. It's singular, singular, singular. The collective is the individual. The individual is the collective, okay? So the one mind has to play all the roles. Kind of schizophrenic that way. And the thing is that the whole basis of the story of the personal self, meaning that person you think yourself to be, the personality that you believe that you are, while it looks individuated across everybody, it's the same story. And that story is rooted in victimization. Absolutely, positively rooted in it. So what the lower mind as ego has to do in order to perpetuate the story is to always, always, always create the situations that will then lead them back to the space where they feel like they're a victim. Okay? It has to do it. Even if you fight against it, at some point it's going to come back there because it has to, because the program will remain at play. Okay? Until it's seen through. So for some people, for most people, I should say, they learn, remember there's something that we call the swing, and that when a person is triggered and they're in what we call the downward spiral of negative states of mind, there's a point at which the person will take some kind of action, whether it is just mental or a physical action like getting up and walking out of a room, or a verbal thing that they would say to another person. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. I mean, it can just be a thought that can be the swing. But what it does is it enables the movement of the downward spiral to stop and to actually swing out and to start moving in the upward spiral of positive states of mind. People become pretty adept at doing that from a pretty young age. Okay. When kids get programmed initially, they go down into the very, very deep, painful levels that adults run away from. They go down into deep shame very easily, very, very easily. And what happens is, because they do that, and then, they're being parented by the program, it gets rooted. Okay. Then what happens coming out of it is that the ego learns certain ways to get itself out of feeling the shame that they feel and the self-loathing that they feel. Okay. Remember, that is the victim. So whatever it is that they need to do, they will do it, whatever it is. So for each, person, that may look a little bit different. Okay. And then they learn that there are certain things that they can do, and then they end up feeling better. So some kids learn to eat, and the food makes them feel better. And some kids learn if they go outside and, burn off some energy, exercise or whatever, like that seems to do it. And some kids go upstairs and scream into their pillows and do all that, and that seems to do it. It could be any number of things. And some kids will do the old try to make amends, kind of like if I'm the penitent person, then all is forgiven. And a lot of times with kids that works very well, because when they come to their parents from that place, their parents are far more apt to take them back in from a loving space than they are if the kid, comes back from a rebellious place, right? But even rebellion serves as a swing, because that sense of self-righteousness allows the ego to kind of, proverbially give the finger to whoever it is that it's in opposition to. And it actually feels good about doing that. Okay. That's a swing too. So most people do learn how to get themselves up into those good states. Now, there are some who don't. And the tendency definitely stays with just swimming around in those lower states of mind. And those are people who suffer with depression, people who end up committing suicide, and just a lot of people who just are just generally very miserable people. They don't even necessarily want to swing out, see, because the story is so, there's an allowance of being the victim for them that there isn't for the others. You see, for the others, they're looking for the savior, right? They're really looking for the savior. And so they find it. And sometimes they find it in food, or they find it in exercise, or in another person. But they will find it because they need that to feel good. Well, the one who's completely stuck in being the victim isn't even looking for a savior. They don't even want a savior, right? Because they just want to be miserable, right? And that's just part of that program. So this extraordinary guy here who comes is in that boat. And it's hysterical to me because anybody who meets him and is around him would be like, how on earth could he see that about himself? Because that's not him. It's obvious to everybody in the outside world, but in his world, it's completely not true. So we talked today about communication I had with him in the past week, where I was kind of saying to him, can you just take just a moment, right, and pull away and view him from outside? Okay, view him and all of the mistakes that you believe he's made, and all the times that he could have done better and he made bad choices, and all of it from the time he was a kid right up until today. And if you back up enough, can you not see the innocence there, that starting from the time that this man was a child, he didn't ask for it, in the sense that, it was programmed onto him. And there is such innocence in that. And it's not his fault that he ended up with the programming of whatever it is. It was placed on him. And in that moment, if you can pull back enough to just see that, and just see him for who he is, in his eternal, perfect self, knowing that it doesn't matter what has occurred in this lifetime and what has occurred and the choices he's made, but if you can see that the choices he made were made because they were the ones that fell in line with the patterning that he picked up, that he didn't go out to look for, he picked it up, right? It was placed on him. Those choices came from that place of innocence. And if you can step back enough and see that, you can see that it's all a lie. Regardless of what the outside world would tell you, regardless of the appearances, because appearances in this world are meant to be deceiving. So from one level, is it true he's made poor choices? He's made choices that caused others pain, and he's made choices that caused himself pain. Of course it's true. Of course it's true. However, is he really the one who made those choices? And the answer is no. The choices were made by a program. And he wasn't anywhere near it. Because you are not the program. The program is not conscious. You are consciousness. And never the twain shall meet. How you, as pure awareness, how could that ever be equated to you making choices that would cause others pain and yourself pain? Well, it can't. In highest truth, you are just as perfected in this moment as you've been in any point in your beginningless and endless existence. Nothing has shifted. You never fell. There was no fall from grace. I don't care what the world looks like. There was no fall from grace, ever, ever. And you are that. You are awareness. You're not a story. And the story is meant to deceive. And the story will keep consciousness trapped in a space of identification. You are not a story. You exist outside of concept altogether. This entire reality is based in concept. There's nothing here that's outside of concept from the space of the lower mind. It's all purely conceptual. All of it. Even God is a concept. And if I tell you, you have to drop all your concepts, what does that mean? Look at it right now. If I tell you, you have to drop all of your concepts. You want enlightenment? All concepts have to be dropped. Look at the undertaking that is. God is a concept. Oh, my word. I'm a spiritual seeker, and you're going to tell me God is a concept? Yes, I am. I'll tell you that life is a concept. Death is a concept. There's nothing here that's not conceptual. That's how it exists here, is because consciousness actually is believing the concepts. That's the only thing that's holding it in place. So I'll tell a little story, something that I experienced in my home today. I'm going to tell it on my husband. He had a really amazing experience today, and I want to share it. And I'm hoping he wouldn't mind. So we took a nap this afternoon, and when he had set the alarm, because he would have to get up to go get one of our daughters from school. And when the alarm went off, of course, it woke me up. And normally, it goes off and it's 2-3 seconds or whatever, and it turns off. I hear it turn off. Well, this time I'm laying there, and this thing is just going on and on and on and on. And I'm like, what on earth is going on? And finally, I sense movement. He kind of sits up, and it's still going, and then finally it turns off. And so he gets up and goes. And when he came back from getting my daughter, we decided to have a cup of coffee together before I had to come here to go to work. So he made a comment to, I think it was my daughter, and we were talking, and then something came up about the alarm going off, and he said, he was saying to her, it was a good thing I set the alarm, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have gotten up to come get you. And he said, and he made the comment, he said, when it went off, he said, I was completely out of it, and it terrified me. And that caught my attention. I mean, he used the word, it terrified me. And I was like, huh. So then we went out we have this little building we're working on for a meditation room. And so we call it our little casita. So we went out there with our coffee to sit and talk for a bit before I left. So I asked him about it. I'm like, so what did you mean? And he said it was the weirdest thing. He says, I haven't had this happen to me in a really long time. He said, but when the alarm went off, he said, I woke up. He said, I had no idea where I was. He says, I had no idea who I was, what was happening, like nothing, just absolutely nothing. He said, and then it terrified me. And I'm over there smiling, he's telling me it's like how disturbing it was to him, and I'm smiling. And I said, well, let me kind of explain to you kind of what happened. So I said, when you're sleeping, consciousness actually removes itself from the physical form. And so you move into the state of pure awareness that you are, that is God, pure awareness. And it exists outside of any story and any concept. I said, and then normally when the body has to wake up, consciousness gets pulled back in, and it moves through the 4 lower bodies, or the first 3, to get to the 4th, which is the physical form. And in that, the personal self kind of gets all reassimilated and integrated. So when you wake up, you know who you are, figure most mornings the alarm goes off and your first thought is, oh crap. Right? That means you know who you are. There's a story there. Okay. So his experience was completely different. So I said, sometimes if the consciousness is really out there, and the body has to wake up quickly, it gets jarred back in very, very fast, and it doesn't move through all of that. So you have a moment when you wake up where it hasn't been reintegrated, and so you're in that space. And I said, actually, it's a very beautiful thing, because that's God. It was just pure awareness. That's all. There was nothing except for awareness. And so I was explaining to him that it was the ego. He actually saw it, and he didn't know it at the time, but he saw it reform, and it reformed from that space of confusion. First the shock of the music starting to play, but then the confusion of what was going on. And then that was followed by the terror. And he literally said it was terror. And I said, well, yeah. I said, because that's the exact experience of consciousness. When it perceived itself as being separate from God, right? There was confusion, and it was followed by terror, because it was in this place of this void, which from the space of identification would be terrifying. And he goes, well, it sucked. And I was laughing, and I said, yeah. I said, but only from the perspective of your story. Because within, the concept of who you believe yourself to be, that body and all the stories that make up who you are, from that place to wake up in a space where all of that is gone, that would suck. Right? I said, but if you can back up to before, when that story started to run, to the very moment where awareness was here, I said, I promise you, there's no sense of it sucking there, is there? And he didn't really want to look at it, because from the space of the ego, well, who would? He wanted the story to be that it was terrible. But he did. He looked at it, and he's like, no, I guess that's right. Because there's no story there. If there's no story, how could we attach a concept to it? That story was bad or whatever, right? You can't. And that's what every one of you is. Your awareness that is locked into a story, and many of them. That's what the collective is. Consciousness, which is individuated but never separated, because there's only one, just one. And equally, there's only one lower mind. So the lower mind that's running the show is single. So the personality that you believe yourself to be is single. There's no multiplicity. There is no multiplicity. And quantum mechanics confirms that. They cannot break down consciousness into something other than a singularity. They can't do it. Well, of course not, because it isn't. It's single. And every personality that seems to be walking the planet is that. It is that singularity. But see, the problem is that conceptually, identification is locked in a space of seeing itself as separate from everything else. That's what makes you unique, right? That's the whole thing. Like, what are you doing over there? I'm sorry. Linda's pulling all kinds of wires out from underneath her shirt. It's very disconcerting over here. Expect me to do a radio program. You need earbuds? It's cute. I don't even have a clue what I was just saying. Something. You see what happens? Was that what? Remind me. The singularity. Yes, even the lower mind is a singularity. Yeah. You see it as a sliding scale, consciousness as a sliding scale, right? Because we always want to separate the lower mind, don't we? It's another thing that the lower mind loves to do. Everything's very black and white. everything is this or that, right? It's never this and that, and that too. So if the mind itself is a huge sliding scale from one end of experience to the other end of experience, then there's no separation in that, is there? I mean, when they say it never happened, when I say it never happened, and I'm talking about the fall of consciousness, I mean it. It never happened. In order for there to be a fall of consciousness, there has to be a break. The break never happened. Because it's all one continuum. If it's one continuum, where on earth could it ever have been separated? You see? You see? You're looking at me a little puzzled. Or like you're deep in thought. Is that a little... Can you get yourself around that? Yeah? You want to come say something? You sure? Linda's the one who doesn't like to talk unless I force her to. Which is why I'm going to make her right now. Come on. Tell me what you're experiencing as I'm saying all this.
Well, something that I've been experiencing lately is visions when I hear things like that, and actually seeing or experiencing it mentally. And I can't describe it with words. It's just that I get a vision of what it might be. And so I was having a vision of what it might be, and that's basically it.
That's good, though. Is that new for you, or is that...
Yeah, it's new for me since, the last few months. Really, things just, something being brought forward, and there's no words. It's just the vision of the truth.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. See, that's a beautiful little nugget that we never would have had otherwise. And let me just say real quickly that when you move into higher states, that it stops being verbal. So for the longest time, it'll be like when something comes, you don't have a head, but for the lack of keeping it understandable, like it feels like it's in your head, right? and for the longest time, it's all words in your head, but it shifts out of that. And you'll move into a space where you get like a gestalt of information, and it comes it's like a packet, and it's nonverbal, but it's a packet of understanding that kind of comes in, and you feel it. It feels like in your head, but you feel it, and there's a lot there, and it doesn't mean that you could verbalize it when it comes. But it does mean that it has kind of entered, I don't know that it's entered consciousness so much as you've opened up to it, because it wouldn't have anywhere else to go. So like you've opened up to that aspect or that piece, and then as needed, it will continue to unfold for you. Right. But that was that moment where it kind of, there it is, and you feel it and you sense it. You don't necessarily understand it. So that I thank you for telling us that, because see, I wouldn't have had any reason to tell you that just now. Synchronicity, see? It's a beautiful thing. If it wasn't for me forcing her to come talk, because she doesn't like to do it, we wouldn't know it. That's beautiful. Pelian, did you have a question?
Yes. You had said earlier, so you said just recently that consciousness is on a sliding scale, even it cannot be separated. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you said the program is not conscious. You are consciousness, and never the twain shall meet. You are awareness. So, I'm trying to think, because I'm looking at a sliding scale in my head. So the program not being conscious, is that on one side of the scale?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it is on the same scale.
Well,
And
the program.
Awareness is the other end?
So awareness, pure awareness, exists outside of any perceiver.
So it's not even on the scale.
It is. I don't even know how to word it. I don't know that there are words. And the mind can't go there. So it wouldn't make any sense for me even to try to explain. See, because in a moment of pure awareness, I mean, there's not even like a witness. You are the awareness itself, right? So I guess from an intellectual place, you could say that like the sense of the sense of even the witness isn't there. There's a witness with when you look at the personal self. You can there's a part that can step back and look at the personality. There's a part that can step back and look at the objective observer. They're both witnessed. Right? They're both witnessed. So that's a whole level of consciousness that is kind of differentiated from pure awareness. See, something has to, down here, something has to function as, the perceiver, and in a sense to be in the world, for a really long time, even when the objective observer is really strong. There's the sense of what's the word I'm looking for? Whether it's a personal story or whether the story is seen as objective, both of them are witnessed, and both of them are. There's a word that I use for this, and I can't even pull it up right now. It's not the word judged, because that has a different connotation. But the concept has to play a role in it, you see. Because without it, even the objective observer, it still functions within concept, you see. But it functions in a broader sense of concept, right? Okay, I hope anyone listening understands that too. So the personal self, remember, is taking the real, right? And then because of the personal story, the personal self, your personality, will overlay what's real with its own version of what's real. All right. So it interprets. That's what I'm looking for. The interpreter. So it interprets reality based on its personal story. All right. So what you see in the world is based on your personal programming. Now, the objective observer can exist outside of the personal self, but it still has to interpret what it sees. Now, it interprets the world from an objective place rather than the subjective place of the personal self. But it still interprets the world. Yes? Okay. So within that, and the objective observer is still part of the construct of the lower mind as well. Not down, like if we looked at it on a sliding scale, it's not down at the bottom like the personal self. It has moved up, but it's still part of that. So when you're in the world, it's because the world is the world of concept, and so it lives in concept. But out there is what in this reality we would think of as like the Christed self, right? The self that functions from the unified field doesn't function from within concept. So it appears to be here and it appears to be in the world, but there's no interpreter interpreting conceptually here. It's very hard to put words around. They're all looking at me like, huh? Remember, appearances are deceiving. So one who's functioning from the unified field, like it may, as far as the world would be concerned, they would look like they were part of the whole thing. But that's actually not what's going on. That really took us completely out of where I was going today. I was meaning it to stay very, actually based in polarity. I wanted it based in polarity today. Thank you for the diversion. To go back, because I do want to make sure that I hit this. Okay, you can look at your own story. Remember, part of the dissolution work is to become the one who can be objective about all the stories, and your own is included in that. It has to become a non-personal, where your own story isn't even you anymore. It's the only way you'll ever see it clearly. Okay, you can never see something clearly if you're invested in the story. You understand? If there's an attachment in place, if there is an unmet need and a desire that is attached to that story, if there is preference attached to the story, you will never see it clearly, because all of those components are going to act as filters, and then you'll see through those filters. So like different lenses on a camera, you use a certain filter if you want to get a certain effect. Well, that's what all your beliefs are. That's what your desires are. That's what your attachments are. Those are all filters. And that's what you see the world through. So when that's going on, you can't actually see what's real. So you have to move to a place where everything, even your own story, is seen from an objective place, meaning you are not attached to your own story anymore. Not easy to do. Now, hopefully, in saying that, you can get some sense of why it's necessary for a person to be fairly stable when they go into doing the work. You see? Because, and I was telling the group earlier, there are times in dissolution work where you literally will feel like you're going crazy. Because it's the understandings you've been given, the experiences that are coming to you, and you holding yourself to moving through them from your level of mental understanding can leave you in a place where you feel like you're going crazy. And that's because it will look like you're doing something that is the exact opposite of what you should be doing, right? Well, of course. The world is crazy. It truly is. And so when you start moving in the world from a sane place, the mind actually experiences it as, I must be crazy. And of course, the mind is the one trying to convince you that it's the sane one. That is not what's going on here. It's the exact opposite. Remember, here, appearances are meant to be deceitful. What you see in the world is meant to deceive you. That is the point. And I go back again to the story of the Buddha. And in the story of the Buddha, as he's sitting under that tree, that's what he experienced were demons. And he had to see past them. And what the demons represent is the world. It is the world. And all of the little components of the world, everything that would come to you that would say, look at me over here, I'm real. You have to get to a place where you can see through them. No, you're not. You're only real here. You don't exist outside of here. And I won't live here. Yeah? You don't have to believe in the concept to move through it, to walk through it. There are plenty of stories and lots of proof out there for levitating yogis and, people who can do all these things that basic physics would say is impossible. People who don't eat for months on end and don't lose any weight. Doesn't make any sense, right? Well, it's all concept. If you live outside of concept, would any of it matter? See? If you live completely outside of, and when I say outside, I mean you are outside of the collective unconscious. You've transcended this whole level. That's what I'm talking about. And at that place, there is no concept. So gravity doesn't mean anything. See? Now your average person can, tell themselves over and over and over, like subliminal message themselves that gravity isn't real, gravity isn't real, gravity isn't real, and then go jump off a building and hit the ground. Because they're part of the collective unconscious, you see, and ruled by it. So in order to function outside of what this world deems as real, like would require the level of the Christ, right? And there are many out there. They don't draw attention to themselves, but many out there. Yogis who will go into bodily stasis for years, where the body's just laying there in a forest someplace, not breathing, no heart beating, but nothing's decomposing, and it just is, and then one day the body reanimates and they're back again. How is that even possible? And then, of course, from the level of the world, you'd say, well, that's impossible. Well, of course it's not impossible. It's only impossible within the space of conceptually what we believe to be the life-death cycle. Well, the life-death cycle is conceptual. You're eternal. If you are eternal, how could a life-death cycle be real? If you're eternal, how could you be born and how could you die? Doesn't make a bit of sense. And if you look at it from the space of just conscious awareness, right? So conscious awareness in one moment appears to be looking through the eyes of a baby. In another moment, it appears to be moving from the space of looking out of the eyes of, say, an old dying person. In the next moment, it's looking into a different space. Where has consciousness gone? Nowhere. So how could it have been born and how could it die? You see? They're concepts. Concepts that are so strong that when they're identified with, result in the material world as you know it, which seems awfully real. If you say you want out, I want off the life-death cycle. This is too painful. I don't want to do it anymore. What do I have to do? I mean, this is what you're walking into. To exist outside of concept. Sit and think about that for a while. You start really looking at concept and how attached to concepts you are. Even for all of the work that you've done to get unattached, you're still so attached to concepts, And they are tethers to this whole reality that you think you're stuck in. Because even that's a concept. You see, there's nothing outside of it. Even that is the concept that there's somewhere to go, the concept that, I have to achieve enlightenment. That's conceptual. It's purely conceptual. I mean, the reality is if all concept dropped in a moment, that's it. It's done. But even the concept that work is involved holds it all in place. I have to be a seeker. And it's true. Again, it's the paradox of the work. It's true. Because on one level, the burning desire for truth is the one thing that's going to pull you through to the place where you are your truth. And that was not worded well. You are the truth. There's no your truth. There's only the truth. Anybody who says that out there, I'm living my truth. Oh, that's a bunch of crap. Truth is truth. That's a nice way that we deceive ourselves and keep ourselves in a space where it's comfortable. You want the truth, it's not going to be comfortable. I promise you that. And just this one piece right now, looking at concept, that should be uncomfortable because the ego is certainly not pleased with that whole prospect. I'm this limited being. Look at me. I can only manage to work a 40-hour-a-week job and make $23,000 a year. And we keep ourselves really small that way. And in truth, the only thing holding that in place is all of the concepts behind it. All the things that you believe you aren't. On top of the things that you believe you are. And they work hand in hand. What if someone raised you from the time you were tiny to know that you were God and that you were limitless and that you were never born and you will never die? And that you aren't your body, that you are formless, pure awareness, pure light. And none of this was real. That it was, the mirrored funhouse at the carnival. That's life. And you can laugh your way through the whole thing. If our children were raised that way, where would we be right now? Worth thinking about. We about time? Okay. So let's use our meditation time tonight to, as we always do. I hope you don't all just hang up when, or disconnect when the meditation music comes on. But the purpose is to take this stuff that came and to give you time. I facilitate from here for all of you to help allow you to integrate what was brought tonight and the energies that did come in. And they got to you, believe it or not. There is no time or space, and so you're right here with me. So enjoy the meditation, and we will see you next week. So much love to you all. Thank you so much for listening. Good night.
You are beginningless. You are endless. You are divine.